All right, today we're going to expand on what we did yesterday in our exploration activity with decimals to look at and take notes on how we can find the volume of different prisms. So volume is the amount of space an object occupies. So kind of think inside. So we're looking at what it would take to kind of like fill that object in. And we want to remember that, like yesterday when we were looking at it, volume is really looking at the number of cubes that we can fit in a unit. So we call those cubic units. And when we do that, another way we could write that, for example, would be like centimeters cubed. So that little 3 is what that means. So we're going to look at just 3 basic types of prisms. So yesterday you worked mainly with rectangular prisms. And that's the example that we see here in the middle. Over on the left, we have a square prism. And then on the right, we have a triangular one. And a prism is always going to be named for its base. In our activity yesterday when we were looking at it, remember how we talked with that bottom layer first and figuring out how much space that was, and then we kind of built it up? That kind of leads us to the volume of all prisms. And this is the really cool thing, is that the volume of all prisms uses the same formula. It's going to use the formula base times height. The difference between this and the area formula, though, you might notice, is that when we talk about base here, we use a capital B, where that capital B is going to stand for the area of the base of the figure. All right? So if our base is a square, because it's a square prism, we would use volume equals the area of the base times the height. But the difference is that base is going to be base times height, or length times width, however you kind of want to think about it. If it's a rectangular base or a rectangle base, it's still going to be area of the base times the height, but now the area of the base is going to be also just base times height. Sometimes you'll see it as length times width. If the base is a triangle, even though it's area of base times the height, now we're really taking base times height and dividing it by 2 and then multiplying it by the height. All right, so hopefully you flipped your paper over, and now we're just going to look at going through some examples. So we want to calculate the volume of this first figure. So here we see we have a square base, so it's going to be a square prism. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to find the area of our square in the bottom. So the area of the square is going to be 6 times 6, or 36. That's the area of just this bottom part. Then I'm going to multiply it by the height of my figure, which in this case is 14. So I'm going to take that area of my base, which is 36, multiply it by 14 because it's going to be 14 stacked high. So our volume ends up being 504 feet cubed. All right, so why don't you pause the video and try this next one on your own. All right, so here our base is a rectangle, and our rectangle is 18 times 5. So the area of the base becomes 18 times 5, which is 90. Then I'm going to multiply it by the height, so how many stacked high it is, which gives us 90 times 8, meaning our volume is 720 feet cubed, because there'd be 720 little cubes that we could fit into that object. All right, let's look at one more. All right, so now this time, even though it's not on the bottom, our base is a triangle. So our triangle's base is 12. Its height is 10. So I'm going to do 12 times 10 and divide it by 2, giving us an area of 60. And then the height of our prism is 14. So I'm going to do 60 times 14. And our volume ends up being 840 feet cubed. So go ahead and reflect on things that you learned about and put this in your notes so that you have it to refer back to later. But the big thing is that it's always area of base times the height of our prism.